Hi, my name is Stephen Lara. I've been coming to Intercessor since 2018. It's a funny story how I started coming to Intercessor. I actually went to a book signing, and while at the store picking out the book to get signed, this gentleman was also looking for a book, and he came over and asked me, because I was shuffling through books, and asked me if I'm looking for the perfect book. And I said, oh yeah, I'm just kind of picky about the books. When I went to go pay for the book on the line, there was the gentleman again, and he just said, oh, hi. And I said, hi. And he said, oh, he asked me, he said, do you go to church? And I said, no, I believe in God, but I don't have a church. I don't go to church. And he said, okay. He said, look, I go to a church in Malvern. And he pulls out a business card, and he hands it to me. And he said, if you'd like to come to church, come check it out. It's nice. I said, sure. And so that night was the book signing for Joel Osteen. I remember being on the line, and I bent down to tie my shoe. And when I stood up, it was the same gentleman that was actually in the front of me on that line. The person I saw at Barnes and Noble was Peter Donahue, so that's why I ended up coming to Intercessor. I have 4 children. Nicholas is my oldest. Is Nicholas, 25. I have a daughter, Leah. She's 12. My son Derek is 9 years old, and my daughter Mila is 3 years old. So my 3 youngest children do come to church with me. My kids love coming to church. They go to Intercessor Kids, and it's amazing to hear them speak about God's message, and how in Sunday school, how they learn about the Word and what it means. And they bring their projects and they explain it to me, and the activities that they do that teaches them also about God and the sacrifice of Jesus, and how it's part of their lives also. So my journey not only affected my life, but those around me, my family. When my journey started, it was different for my kids to see me read a Bible. And I remember us watching different stories. There was one about the book of Jonah, and I watched it with the kids. I remember watching it for the first time, not even knowing who Jonah was. And when I watched it, it was hard for me to believe. And as my journey continued, and when I got into the Word and started reading it, I noticed that a lot of the stories that I watched with my children, that's where I was learning too. So it wasn't just a decision I made. I knew that God led me to show my kids these Bible stories, and at the same time I was learning. It was amazing, because watching these cartoon shows, I learned about God's work, things that I never knew. And so we were all learning at the same time. And I remember the kids asking me questions, and sometimes I had answers and sometimes I didn't. But it was nice, because we all knew that it was the truth. It was true what God was revealing to us, his mighty works and his power and the impact it was making on our family. It was amazing, because it would be together as a family, and we were learning together under God's grace and learning about his love pouring over our family. I remember asking my son, it was actually Derek who asked me, why are we learning about God? And I asked him, what do you mean? He's like, well, we didn't learn about God before, and now we are, and now we read the Bible. And I said to him, well, because this is the truth, and I want you to grow up knowing that you have a true Father in heaven. I want them to have that foundation, to know that, our lives are built on faith and love, and that comes from God, who is love. And to hear them pray and speak to God and express different feelings, it's amazing. It's something that I never knew or could even imagine or have seen without God revealing it to me first. I was out of a job. My company just closed down. I taught for a school, and it was a tech school, it was a trade school. A couple of weeks, I was struggling finding a job. So I said, what, let me go to church. I need to get some peace in my heart. And I remember telling my wife, I said, look, why don't we check out this church? And she kind of looked at me and said, why don't you go recon the church? And I said, sure, okay, yeah, let me go see what this church is about. So I remember coming to church, and I remember sitting in the back and listening to the service, and I definitely felt peaceful. And I remember the procession when it came down the aisle, and as the procession came down, one of the guys coming down just had his hands together, and then he looked over, pointed at me, and said, "Steve Lara." And I thought I saw a ghost. It was Deacon Eddie. And the last time I saw Eddie Pirro was in high school. And those were some rough days. So to see Eddie coming down in the procession at a church, I was terrified. I didn't know what was going on. But I did know I was in the right place. And I remember there were tears running down my eyes. All I knew is that I was in the right place. I knew that something was changing. I didn't know what, but it was okay. And so from that day, I remember going home and telling Ruth, like, I just saw Eddie Pirro, and I used to hang out with his brother, and Eddie and I crossed paths a few times, and that's a whole other story. It was just amazing to see that there was this life transformation that happened instantly in my eyes, because that's the first time I've seen Eddie in over 15 years. But by the grace of God, we were brought back together, and in a point in my life where I knew that something needed to change. From then, we would come every Sunday with the family, with my family, and it's really nice. I loved coming, but I felt as if we were coming just to come. Like it would be each weekend. It was beautiful. Again, I haven't been in church in, who knows, since whenever, maybe 20 years before that, and maybe on holidays and Easter. But the kids loved it, and we would make it when we can, and I remember that, because things have changed now. I remember we would leave like at the end of the service, and I always remember that, even now when music is played at the end, people stuck around, like they just hung out for a little bit. Within that month, actually, that I came to church, I got a job, and I remember praying and thanking God for that, because I knew that it came from Him. But the sentiment still was that, in the time of need, I pray and I would get these things. And that's how I kind of lived my life for the next year or two. And I would feel that, like there was something else that was blocking certain growth in my life. I didn't really know what it meant. I just knew that there were days that I would pray to God, like, I feel like there's this ceiling in my life, and I don't know how to get through it. And I would attribute it a lot to my career. Like I would go, okay, I'm not moving up at work. I don't understand. I'm at this job. I like it. I've been there for a couple of years, but I don't know what's happening. So God, help me break this ceiling. Like, why? So I started going back to school. I started doing all these activities. And the more I did them, things were growing, but I still felt this ceiling, this block. And fast forward to about the year of COVID, 2020. And that year was rough. I remember things shutting down at my job. I took a big initiative, and I got everybody going remote, and got everybody on a computer. The owner and the senior leadership, they thanked me, and it was a great move. We got everybody transitioned, and by the grace of God, everybody was able to work from home. So, I was super happy about that. And then I was feeling scared. It was a period of COVID, the world of uncertainty and the unknown. I've always taken care of my mom. And so I remember I would go and get groceries. I would mask up, and I felt like it was like this period, this trial of making sure I took care of my family, including everyone at home and my mom. And I felt this separation from everybody. You know, I have an older son, he's 25 years old. I knew I wasn't going to be able to see him for a while, and I didn't know how long. I kept kind of saying, oh, it's going to be 2, 3 weeks like we all thought, but the time kept extending. As the time extended, I started feeling lonelier and lonelier, like in this, the pressure kind of setting in. Like it was, okay, what do I do now? Like I think I'm doing everything I need to do. And I tried to stay strong. During that summer, that year, I started feeling just more fear setting in. Even though it seemed like the worst of it was kind of over, I still started feeling like all this pressure from what had happened and sadness that I wasn't able to see my mom for so long. I felt anxiety build, and so I decided to call a doctor and say, hey, look, something, I don't know, I don't feel right. I think, you know, a lot of work going on. Maybe I'm feeling like a burnout. And I called a doctor, and he was like, hey, look, if you're kind of feeling like that, maybe you want to see somebody for it. And I said, sure, yeah, let me just see what's happening. And I remember as each day it was getting worse. And I remember calling everywhere, therapists, doctors, and every time they said something to me, I felt like I was falling further into this pit of fear. And I didn't know what to do. I remember the first day I went to see the therapist, and she was a regular therapist, one that you call on a clinical website. And I sat across from her, and I told her these feelings that I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat, I felt scared all day and night. And one of the first questions she asked me was, do you trust God? And I honestly didn't know what to answer because I was shocked by the question. So I looked at her and I said, and I just didn't know what to say. And she said, do you trust God? And I'm like, I think I do. I didn't know how to answer. I'd never really thought about it. So she said, look, one of the hardest things I ever had to do, and you're a parent and I'm a parent, was hand my kids over to God. And I had to learn to do that. I felt like all of a sudden there was an answer. The way she described handing over her kids to God, I pictured it. And with that example, I felt like this has to be it. This feels like something just happened. You know, I went home thinking about that. And, you know, at this time, you know, my wife is worried. My mom knows very little about this. She's kind of worried, but she doesn't really know. I don't tell her much because I don't want to worry people. Every day I felt like I was going to die or end up in a hospital. It was scary. And so after that, I still kind of had the same feelings. And again, you know, I kind of went home, thought about it for a minute, and then it was gone. It was about, what do I do? Now what do I do? She recommended a nurse, and I went to a nurse, and they said, look, why don't we give you something to calm down with? Here's some medications. And I took it on a Friday and a Saturday. I started feeling really weird. And so I called a nurse, and I was like, hey, this stuff is making me feel, and I kind of described the feeling. And I remember her laughing at me and saying, no, that doesn't do that. And I'm like, how? I don't get it. And I felt everywhere I turned, anything I said wasn't really being heard. And so I'm like, I don't really understand what's happening. I was taking a lot of walks at that time in the morning because I just couldn't sleep and I couldn't think. So I would literally get up and get my dog and go for a walk and pray and kind of, you know, for a little bit, but then just kind of think. I was doing everything from meditation apps to just listening to music to try to calm me down. And my brother called me, and I picked up the phone, and he was like, hey, what's happening? You're okay? And I said, yeah, I just, you know, I just don't feel right. These are the things that are happening. And I kind of let him know everything. And when I told him about the medication, he said, what do you mean? And I said, yeah, I'm trying to take it. I don't know. Maybe I just have to kind of get used to it. And he said, no. He's like, you're going to talk to God right now. We're going to pray. And we're gonna ask him for your full healing. That is not, you are not to take that medicine. And I don't recommend this, But this, I am letting you know, this was my salvation. My brother started praying, and I remember as he prayed, I was praying with him, and it was very intense. And I remember falling to my knees and praying and just feeling exhausted and this weight coming off of me. And as I cried out to the Lord, I know He heard me. I felt it in my heart. I felt it in my soul. And I felt His voice releasing me from a bondage that I didn't even know I was in. My wife looked at me like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, I know it's okay. This is it. This is it. This is my healing. This is how I'm going to be healed. And she was scared. She was very scared. We had a barbecue that night, and it's the first time she's seen me smile in almost 3 months. And it was amazing. I felt more alive than I ever did in my life. I wasn't scared. I felt comforted. I felt as if my new walk started. Not knowing it was a walk at the time, I kind of felt like it was this instant, I'm good. And I was grateful. I was grateful that day that I spoke to my brother, and our Heavenly Father used my brother to deliver me from a bondage that I didn't know, a darkness that I didn't know that I was in at that time. There were moments where a couple of weeks would go by and I would feel the same feeling again, and I remember crying for days on end. But each time I cried, I felt a little better. But I would ask God, I would ask Him, like, why am I going through this? I don't understand. There's days that I would pray and I feel like I'm falling, that I'm literally in this pit falling. And then I would imagine Him lifting me back out. My restless nights became peaceful nights. It got a little harder before it got better. But the hard nights, I had a comfort knowing that it was going to be okay, because I knew God was with me. When I would speak to, Deacon Eddie about it, or my brother about it, the words that were coming out of their mouths, I couldn't believe. They were talking about what correction meant, what character building was, what an intimate relationship with God was, what it is like to know God. And I remember opening the Bible, and I said, okay, because of the line of work I do, I said, I'm going to learn about this. I'm going to learn what this is about. Like, what does it mean to know God? And I remember going into the Proverbs and reading them. And the more I read them, the more scared I got. I was so afraid. And I remember taking notes, and the things I would read, I'm like, I don't think I can do this. This is bad. This is going to be bad. And I brought this to someone. She said to me, why don't you start in the book of John? She said, why don't you start in the book of John and know who Jesus is? Each page I turned in the book of John taught me about the love of Jesus, about how He loved people and how He wanted me to heal, and how He was already healing me, and how He's been there the whole time. I remember growing up, whenever anybody around me or family, culture-wise, would speak about the Bible, it was a scary thing. Like, if you brought up the Bible, it was like, oh no, what happened? Something happened because you're picking up the Bible. And now it became this book of love. Like, it was amazing. I never understood how to read the Bible. I remember attempting it, reading a couple of times, but when you start on page 1, it's really hard. And so starting in the book of John brought me closer to Jesus, and I started learning that faith and hope and God's promises were going to bring me through these really, really rough times that I was going through. God has been with us the whole time, and He knew that on this journey and in this path that we were going to meet Him in a point in our lives when we come to the end of ourselves. And that's what I feel happened. I feel that there was a point where my strength was just not enough, and God was there, like He always was. He gave me a freedom that was always there for me, but because we have free will, It's something we choose. I am thankful for my church community. It's amazing, what it's done in my life, and being in the Word and being closer to God, and how Jesus spent time with people all the time. That connection is amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing to see how a faithful life actually brings you closer to people, and how much we need each other, in family, in friends, and the love of God through us being poured into others, how it can change their lives also, because it definitely changed mine. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to be part of it, and to be able to, honored to say that I am part of being able to advance God's kingdom here on earth. It's something that I want to continue to learn about, continue to do, and being in a Word and knowing the truth is salvation and freedom. What the cross means for me is a sacrifice. I feel as if there's a lot of things that I go through and people around me go through, and when I look at what Jesus did on the cross, he took our shame, our guilt, our sickness to the cross for us to continue to live. Each breath we take, each step we take, every opportunity we have is because Jesus went to the cross, is because of the sacrifice he made. I look at the cross as somewhere where days that I have to go and put things down myself daily, things that we carry, the heavy burdens that he's already taken and gave up his life for our salvation. His mission for us was to know him, and to know what an ultimate sacrifice is for us. It's a symbol of love, and it's a symbol of a strength that is in us, but more of how much he loved us, and how much God loved us to give up his one and only Son for our salvation and our healing.